Hello, Amanda Newworth here, and I have a very, very special guest, Phillip Lindsay. Phillip Lindsay is an Australian-born esoteric astrologer and has the most incredible knowledge about the hidden history of humanity. I'm going to leave so many links below for everybody, but I have invited Phillip to come on to talk about Australia and New Zealand. Hello, Phillip, and welcome.
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, everyone.
Now, in your wonderful journeyings through information, probably it's thick as libraries, book upon book and knowledge upon knowledge, could you please give some insight into what is going on with Australia and New Zealand, with it being in such a serious situation of freedom, really facing?
Sure. Perhaps I'll just sort of touch on what esoteric astrology is too, Amanda, seeing you mentioned it. It's really the astrology of the soul as opposed to the astrology of the personality, which most astrology is these days. And it's very good, a lot of that astrology. It's humanistic or psychological. It looks at the integration of the personality and the invocation of the spirit. But esoteric astrology gives a lot more tools and knowledge that look at one's soul purpose in the horoscope and how to invoke that soul purpose through the particular rising sign of the horoscope, the rising sign having far more importance in esoteric astrology than exoteric astrology, as we call it. But Australia and New Zealand is just frankly such a mess at the moment. It's very painful to watch from where I live in Europe, and to communicate with my friends on Telegram that I have, who give me in-depth reports of what's going on there. And I wrote about it, of course, in my most recent newsletter. I've written about Australia a few times. If you go to my website, esotericastrologer.org, and go to the section in newsletters called Search by Subject, you can find a section on Australian commentaries there. For instance, I had a long newsletter on the fires a few years ago. So I wrote about Australia and New Zealand from the point of view of the fact that they share the sign Virgo in common. Virgo, the Virgin, who's the soul energy that conditions Australia, and the personality of New Zealand. So they both share something in common with this Virgo energy. And I pointed out that both countries are somewhat enslaved to the lower expression of Virgo, which is like a obsession with health and cleanliness and purification, and the relation to, because Virgo is a sign that relates to healing. It's one of the healing signs of the zodiac, and it covers all the different modalities of healing that are around, from mainstream exoteric healing to all the alternative therapies. And mainstream healing, medical healing has a place. But what's happened, as has happened all around the world, and Australia and New Zealand are like a microcosm of what's been going on, is that they have fallen foul of this lower expression of Virgo. But that's not the only thing, of course. Australia and New Zealand have been almost hijacked by other forces that operate from Europe or globally. And this is again the kind of microcosm of what's been going on around the world. So the once, for instance, heroic Jacinda Ardern, in terms of the Christchurch shooting and so forth, she has revealed herself to be just another politician that's been manipulated, similar to the many state leaders in Australia, such as Dan Andrews in Victoria, a person who appears to me to have become totally possessed, obsessed, controlled, as I said in a recent newsletter, there are people who say that he's controlled completely by the Chinese, and there may be some truth in that. But what has happened is that this has brought out the worst in Australia. I remember the worst of Australia came out in the Lindsay Chamberlain thing about almost 30 years ago, when she was demonized by the entire population of Australia, and the media just went mad on the whole thing. There was basically a national hysteria, and but what's happening, what appears to be happening now, is that Australia has reverted to its penal colony days, settled by convicts a couple of centuries ago, and the draconian kind of lockdowns and edicts from various state governments is just appalling. So, excuse me, this has happened in various other parts of the world. I'm in touch with people in Canada who are experiencing the same thing. It's not so bad where I am in Europe, in Portugal, for instance, and Spain. Although we do have, you have to wear your mask in the supermarket or a place that's 400 square meters or larger. But it's pretty relaxed compared to the obscenities, is probably the best word I can think of, that's happening to Australian people, to the intimidation by police on people who, for the slightest thing, it's just way over the top, especially when we consider the fact that the rate of COVID deaths is minuscule in Australia, minuscule. So this is an over the top, out of proportion reaction, and the same in New Zealand. And I've brought this out for the last 22 months in all my newsletters. I have a special coronavirus section on the search by subject section I mentioned before, that details my consistency in all my researches. Sometimes a newsletter used to take me a week, 3 days to a week to write. The last 22 months, they've taken me almost 3 or 4 weeks to write, because I've had to do so much research to really, weigh the pairs of opposites, all the conflicting arguments, to really find out for myself concretely, and then allow my intuition to work with that to take a position. Essentially, I've had to take a position on this, and I've in the process, I've alienated friends, co-workers, and so forth, because this has split the entire global community down the middle in all strata of society, spiritual groups, you name it. The encouraging thing that's happening now is that a lot of pushback is happening. If you're on Telegram, you can get an amazing amount of information coming through there that is not being repeated on Facebook or any other social media, or all the newspapers and YouTube and so forth that ban all these. They ban any discussion on the subject.
That's correct. I've been banned many a time. So I have several different channels because the very thing that you're talking about, it's a very interesting time here. A lot of it I have noticed, though, is that there's a lot of optics going on. What people are seeing overseas is being used as a manipulation against them as well for what is coming. It is horrendous here, no doubt at all. And it's so true what you were saying about the splitting. And I would almost say that it is like there are different tribes. That's the state that we're at, where there are tribes that are going, I will only die on my feet, and there's tribes that will just march off. In what I would, in my world, is like an uninformed ignorance, and the split is there, and there's not really the across jumping back over anymore. So would that be this tribal thing, the presence of this tribe, is that, could we liken that to a ray, or is that an incarnation? Do you have any understanding of this split and this divide?
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about it a lot, of course, and written about it. And basically, the reason for the great mystery of why so many really smart people have fallen for the mainstream narrative, and why yet your ordinary man in the street can see through the bullshit, relates to intuition, and everyone has a measure of some intuition or other, which is really common sense, the sixth sense, common sense, and a lot of strongly intellectually developed people lack intuition. In fact, they focus in on the concrete, and so this is partly the reason why this mysterious schism has occurred, where and even between friends and family and co-workers and spiritual communities, there are splits where people have decided to have made the decision to go along with the mainstream narrative, to even take the vaccination, despite a lot of information that's out there. And of course, we call this cognitive dissonance, when the information is there, but the person has already made up their mind. And so despite what other evidence they're presented with, they will not change their mind. And this is what's happened in communities I'm associated with all around the planet. And it's very hard to fathom. And of course, a lot of people have been intimidated to get the shot, and because they're threatened with their livelihood, or loss of income, loss of job, can't pay off the mortgage, all those kind of things. This is universal again. It's happening in Britain, in Italy. There are some shocking countries in Europe that are going to the extreme, like Australia and Canada and New Zealand. So the key thing that I've been trying to emphasize in the last 22 months is the factor of glamour. There's the book by Alice Bailey called Glamour, A World Problem. I base most of my writings on Alice Bailey's material, and including Esoteric Astrology. And essentially, we are surrounded by a thick fog of astral substance that is preventing people from seeing clearly. And this is certainly an attack by the so-called materialistic forces. I won't go any further and call it by other names. We'll just use that generic name, against the forces of light. And I talk about how 2025 is a once in a century meeting between the masters of wisdom that will determine, particularly this particular century in 2025, when they are going to come back amongst humanity again. And this hasn't happened for a very long time, not since the ancient days of Atlantis. And so the forces of materialism know this is going to occur. They know that there's a decision and a date that will be fixed after 2025. So this is an all-out assault on humanity by those forces to prevent this externalization of the hierarchy, as it's called, from occurring.
Is that similar to what we're being told as ascension?
Ascension is kind of a new agey kind of more, if you like, astrally polarized viewpoint that concerns the kind of idealistic thought life of a lot of aspirants on the path today, which is, I want to get out of here. This is my final incarnation. I'm ascending now. As they say, ascend now and avoid the rush. But the ascension truly is technically what we call the fourth initiation, which is a very advanced stage of unfoldment. Many spiritual aspirants on the path today are somewhere between the first and second degree initiations. It's a very what we call glamoured area of study, because people always seem to be able to want to put themselves ahead of where they truly are. There are people who haven't even taken the first initiation, for instance, who think they're in line to take the fourth degree in this life. And So the fourth degree initiates are people like Paramahansa Yogananda, Ramana Maharshi, Krishnamurti, all these kind of people, and lesser known people in the West as well, that have reached that stage of liberation. But you could say that there is an ascension process going on in consciousness. We are all at different rungs of the ladder, of the evolutionary ladder. And so there is a mass initiation going on on the planet at the moment as people start to wake up. This is the first degree initiation, it's called. The birth of the Christ consciousness, or the Maitreya consciousness within the heart. And that's been going on, in fact, for about a century, through the past 2 world wars. And there are smaller groups up the ladder. They get smaller and smaller, these groups of other people poised to take the other initiation. Initiation being an expansion of consciousness that takes place over many lifetimes, which each of us as individuals initiate ourselves at some point in some life, and reap the benefits of that in terms of expanded consciousness in another life. And it also relates to a formal ceremony that takes place on the inner planes. So we're an extraordinarily exciting time right now. The world is meeting the dweller on the threshold, or the global shadow, and the materialistic forces are part of that, but we're all part of that too. It's not just, we can't just blame them, so to speak. We are the materialistic forces in many ways, that we have all contributed to the global dweller for thousands of years, in terms of what we've created, this monster we've created. So we're meeting the global dweller on the threshold, just as an individual disciple or aspirant on the path meets their own dweller on the threshold of their own shadow. And it's a great time to be talking about this during Scorpio, because Scorpio is all about shadow work. So that's what we're seeing at the moment. And these very intelligent, if you like, the world intelligentsia, who run big pharma, big medicine, big tech, big media, a lot of these people are the tools of the materialistic forces, because they have highly developed intellects, but many of them lack compassion or empathy. And many of them too are taking part of it in this mass hypnosis. That's another word that is I keep coming back to. Through the glamour of the astral plane, this mass hypnosis has come about, and many leaders, I think, in Australia and New Zealand and around the world, have been deliberately focused upon, not just by some of these people in the WEF, the World Economic Forum, and the WHO and so forth, but by some of these more shadowy forces, in order to bring about control of the various populations of those countries that the leaders lead.
Definitely. We all talk about the institutionalization of the private cabal, basically, how they have created the entire network through every sort of system, to even make potentially establishing Australia as the headquarters of their new world order, which is quite incredible, because we're an island fortress. It's a perfect space for them to do it. The technology, people wouldn't have a clue. We're all got the convict mentality, which is just put your head down, try to weave your way through and not get in trouble with the corrupt cops and the corrupt government, which has come back. Now, this gnosis that you're talking about, this shadow part, it is so important to know that what you are experiencing out here is partly you've got to do the work on the inside of you, the shadow work. This is where every week I do a tarot reading to try to help people with the energies around, so that they can do some inner work. I call it inner work. So that's what. So I really love you to expand on this, because you are an adept.
I'm not an adept. I'm far from an adept. I'm extremely imperfect. Some parts of me are good, but a lot of it's imperfect. I aspire towards, whatever next stage I'm supposed to reach. But one is always humbled by having reflected back to you from your co-workers, just exactly what you need to work on.
Yes, it's so true. And we're always a work of art. We're a work of art, and it doesn't stop. It's continual.
And I've read this stuff about Australia being a headquarters for that, and it's quite feasible, of course, but I have no way of proving it for myself. But you wanted me to comment on the gnosis, so I wasn't quite sure what you meant.
Well, yes, just to bring it all back, because you're talking about the shadow and you're talking about gnosis, whereas people possibly listening to this would never know what gnosis was.
Well, gnosis is the spiritual knowledge, of course, as in Gnostic.
Yes.
And my specialty is the ageless wisdom, the perennial philosophy, the age-old truths that are re-enunciated from millennium to millennium. And the system that I work through the teachings of the Master Dwaj Kul, also called the Tibetan, who used Alice Bailey as his amanuensis for a period of 30 years and wrote 24 books through her. I'd explored many things before I found the Alice Bailey books, and it was like coming home for me. It was like, oh, this is it. This is what I'm here for. And all my books and writings are based on those teachings to step them down a bit, because they're quite abstract for a lot of people, and can be quite dense to wade your way through. And also the theosophical material of Helena Blavatsky, who started the Theosophical Society. Her writings, The Secret Doctrine, and various other writings that she brought out back then, still I don't think have been done justice, and will take centuries to do so. And I've tried to do some justice to it through my book originally my book called The Hidden History of Humanity, which is the name of my video that you can find on YouTube. But that book has now been updated, and it's now called Unveiling Genesis, Mysteries of the Root Races and Cycles.
Okay.
And it's called Unveiling Genesis because I based the first, a lot of it on the first 6 chapters of Genesis, which Blavatsky gives a hint about exploring in terms of the history of the world encoded within those first 6 chapters. And various other chapters too she talks about, but mainly those first 6 chapters. So my Unveiling Genesis book is about how that world esoteric history of the root races and Lemuria and Atlantis and so forth unfolds, and also the chronology for it. And I've taken all the information, about probably 80% of the information, from the Secret Doctrine, but also Alice Bailey's material. The Master Dwaj Kul was in fact one of the teachers of Blavatsky, and he continued his stream of teaching through Alice Bailey. And there will be a third phase of this teaching coming this century, we are told, and another amanuensis will be used by the Master Dwaj Kul to transmit a third phase of the teachings. So anyway, so that's where I'm at, and you can find more information about that, of course, on my website.
Absolutely. Incredible. The scholar, this is where such a true statement of you, that you are the scholar and the intuitive, because when I was an aspirant at around 20 years old, and I used to do studies of the texts, etc., it's such an incredible language landscape that you're dealing with when you're an aspirant, that you do actually have to apply not imagination, but the intuition, because it's of a language that is not English. It's painted, it's the artwork that it's describing. Then I have often, when I read your newsletters, that you are a translator of these forces, basically, of the Oh, translating, that's a perfect way of it. And I do see you as a scholar and an intuitive. And I thank you for that. Can we, just before we move on, a lot of people cast a dark cloud over the secret doctrines about Blavatsky and Annie. And one of the things that I've learned on my journey is that you can have one stone, two different people can pick up that stone, and two totally different outcomes.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are saying that Madame Blavatsky started the Freemasons.
Yeah.
And and is responsible for the material.
Let me address it.
Thank you so much.
It's a big one.
Yes.
Spiritual teachings have been demonized by the ignorant, by the superstitious, by the materialistic forces themselves, of course. And so, for instance, the word Lucifer has been used in connection with Blavatsky. They used to have a journal, a theosophical journal called Lucifer, which technically means light bringer. It means, and it refers to Venus, in fact, which is regarded as the highest self or soul planet or soul sister of Earth. And of course, that deliberately challenged existing Christian paradigms that had been built up for centuries, where the light bringer was basically the opposite, El Diablo, the devil, and so and also when the Alice Bailey books were set up to print, they called it Lucifer Trust, which has since been changed to Lucis Trust because of the demonization that immediately jumped in, and so that's one of the main things. And then I've seen various commentators recently. Someone sent me a video by a woman in New Zealand who was just taking all this rubbish that's been built up over decades and that demonizes those probably the best spiritual teachings, synthesized teachings for the Western mind that has been presented to humanity. But they are a real gift. What came through Blavatsky, what came through Bailey. Blavatsky was a real revolutionary.
Yes. And
so the ignorant who have all their cultural and religious conditioning easily criticize it. And I've seen all the Christian fundamentalist stuff that criticizes those teachings. And the other thing is that Freemasonry, like everything else, has been misused and abused in terms of its power. Yeah. But Freemasonry will be restored in the Aquarian Age to be a major service to humanity and a place where initiation can take place.
Yes.
So a lot of people keep on talking about the Freemasons and they don't know anything about the Freemasons. I was a Freemason for a while. In several different crafts, and I explored it, and I know what I'm talking about in terms of those experiences of how it's one of the most powerful ways to invoke spirit into matter on this planet. It's a form of ritual magic, you could say, or group magic. And again, people think, "Oh, magic," it's usually associated with black magic or selfish magic as opposed to white magic or altruistic magic. And magic is simply learning these universal laws in such a manner that we can apply them through the discipline of the mind and the emotions, the directing of energy through visualization and meditation and all those kind of things. One of the Tibetan's books is called A Treatise in White Magic. It's a brilliant book in terms of showing us the various signposts for the spiritual path. But of course, there are many other guidelines. Even the Bible, read and interpreted correctly, the Christian Bible, is a great spiritual guide. And likewise in the other religions. But the religions have become so crystallized in the last 2,000 years: Judaism, Islam, even Buddhism, yes, Christianity or churchianity as it's become, that it's driven people away from, it's driven the faithful away from the true essence of the Christ teachings. And so a new world religion will emerge in the Aquarian age, where there's a synthesis of all religions, and of course the nascent interfaith movement at the moment is working towards that, of different religious people, leaders talking to each other, is a step in that direction. So Alice Bailey also coined the phrase "the New World Order," which has been hijacked by materialistic forces. You see, you see all these film clips where they talk about the New World Order, the New World Order. You know, build back better. It's the same type of mantra. All that stuff. It's all been hijacked. But many people who are not on the spiritual path, or even who are very young or new to the spiritual path, don't have the discrimination to tell the difference. This is the problem. This, and also the Tibetan says that most of humanity is still astrally polarized. There's only a small proportion of humanity that has reached a stage of mental development in this fifth root race, which I discuss in my book and in the video. The fifth root race, it represents the highest expression of manas, or mind. And so we have a proportion of the human race that's reached that point in terms of their soul evolution, and can hold the energy for the rest of humanity. But a lot of those people also are not fully developed in terms of the heart wisdom. And so that mental energy gets abused, and the various ideals that, or distorted ideals that some of them have had. For instance, I've always referred to Bill Gates as having a distorted ideology. I've been very generous to him in terms of seeing him someone who's just led himself astray, but I see him now as someone who's absolutely obsessed with power. It's not about the money anymore. No. It never was, really. And a lot of people like him. The selfish billionaires, I call them, you know, that are more about self-aggrandizement and feeding the ego, and you know, remote focus on going to Mars or something like that, rather than help to fix up the problems of the planet.
Yeah.
So we have these incredible schisms all the way through the world, and we're facing every demon that we've ever created, really, at this point in history. And we have to, you know, the masters of wisdom are watching and waiting for humanity to make the right decision. They're watching their disciples and initiates and aspirants in the various ashrams, yep, to see what sort of decisions they make. These are all tests and trials for initiation, and also, of course, primarily to clear the decks for the externalization of the hierarchy, which all the spiritual workers of the world will pave the way for. They will pave the way for the externalization of the ashrams, and for the masters of wisdom to come into embodiment and walk amongst humanity, which has not happened since the ancient days of Atlantis, when they were forced to withdraw.
Incredible.
So this is a huge point in history. We are at the point of the cusp of the age of Pisces and age of Aquarius. We're on the cusp of two cycles: the outgoing sixth ray cycle of devotion and idealism, and the incoming seventh ray cycle of ceremonial order or magic. And we're also on the cusp of two root races: the fifth root race moving into the sixth root race. The sixth root race being that race that will eventually become entirely intuitive, and intuition meaning direct knowledge, which has that universal language. As before, it has no language really. It's a universal language that can be interpreted through any language.
which is incredible, isn't it? Because the knowing of that to be occurring, to me, it's going to be telepathic. To be telepathic, we have to be really clean on the inside. We really have to get in there and we have to get rid of all of the shadows. Any little doubt, it's, you know.
The Tibetan says that he discusses this in one of his books called Telepathy. Telepathy and the Etheric Vehicle is the name of the book by Alice Bailey. And how we'll all know each other's thoughts.
Yep.
So yes, you have to guard the gates of thought and also purge yourself of all the impurities of thought and emotion. But it's in Scorpio, the sign we're in now, a water sign, water being a symbol of the emotions, where the true emotional cleanup takes place, purging, purification, all those P words.
Yep.
And ruled by the planet Mars, Scorpio being ruled by the planet Mars at both the personality and the soul level. And Mars, of course, its symbol is the upright male phallus. So Scorpio is infamously associated with sex and its misuse and abuse. So the whole field of desire is what the spiritual aspirant is annually challenged with when the sun goes through Scorpio. The Scorpio is regarded by the masters as a sign of discipleship, and that rules over generically the second degree initiation, where the complete control of the astral body is finally demonstrated, which can take a very, very long time. But once that initiation is taken, the higher initiations come relatively quickly, either in the same life or succeeding lives. So, but this year, I think Scorpio is going to be particularly testing for the world as a whole, for the world aspirant, the world disciple, for humanity as a whole. I've been exploring and thinking about writing the next newsletter. I'm going to thinking about discussing Pandora's box, which, if you know about that mythology, was hidden in Pluto's realm in the underworld. Pluto being one of the rulers, the co-rulers of Scorpio.
Yeah. Yes.
And so when she opens the box, all the negative aspects of humanity escape from it. We are kind of already in that place already. You know, the Pandora's box has already been opened, courtesy of Pluto trancing through Capricorn the last few years. And it's so everything's out there. We're seeing all the horrors, all the underworld, if you like, Pluto's underworld, of what humanity has created itself. We have all, have karmic connections to those creations, and we have to clean up. That's the key thing. We have to clean up the astral plane, and that will be something that the age of Aquarius, an air sign, provides a great opportunity to do as we go through the next 2,000-year cycle.
An absolute mess. And if we go back to what Annie said, she said about the fog, and that fog is like a detritus, and people actually feel what I've noticed, because I'm a healer, so I'm a Scorpio, and straight through can find the laser beam in there. And the fog is the incredible part. People are starting to feel it. People are actually starting to feel the fog. They've been talking about this heaviness. And so I'm actually sort of showing people that all they need to do is open to the light, and the fog will go into it. We can clear it, because the astral is filthy. It's just filthy.
Absolutely. And that's one of the meditations that I'm involved with a group, where in fact the formula the meditation has been given for group meditation to dissipate planetary glamour. It was given by the in last century, and essentially it is about using the light of the mind to focus on this astral fog and dissipate those clouds of glamour or fog. Same thing, really, glamour, fogs. It's a great analogy for glamour, and to visualize the light, and in visualizing that light and projecting that light to the clouds of glamour that exist around the earth, and some parts of the earth are much worse than others. For instance, the Middle East. You can actually shift it. And that's what several groups that I know of are working on at the moment in their various capacities, doing that every day or once a week, and directing. And I'm quite sure it's actually working. It's starting to work. If you have that discipline and that focused intent, it must do. So this is like a preview of what the rest of the Aquarian age is going to be about, where we're going to be far more empowered to clear these fogs from the planet that the materialistic forces work so easily with. That's what they do. They stir up glamour in humanity, and they don't have to do much really, because we haven't freed ourselves from glamour yet.
That's right.
This is what's happening now, is that many people are emerging, and in a way, things will probably get much worse in the next 2 or 3 years. And as things get much worse, people will finally have the penny drop and go, this isn't right, and will start to resist and rise up. But that's already happening.
That's right.
It's very encouraging to see. And these materialistic forces are getting so desperate now, they don't care. They're just blatant. I mean, the ABC television is one of the worst examples of a takeover that's occurred, because we've been relying on RT-ABC since 1935. My mother who's in her 90s now, is a good example of someone who's trusted and enjoyed the ABC for so many decades, and likewise myself too. But in the last few decades, the ABC has changed, but a lot of their long-term viewers have not realized that. They've not realized that now it's a complete propaganda arm of these forces, many of whom are controlling the ABC from Europe, from Brussels and places like that. The ABC, I go into the website and read it for maybe an hour or two a week, as much as I can stand before I have to bail out. But it's almost identical to the Guardian, to Britain's Guardian. It's a complete propaganda rag now. Every single article about coronavirus is complete spin, complete lies. At first it was kind of just more of a slight distortions, but now it's just absolute outright lie. And that's just an example of 2 news media outlets in the world, not counting all the ones in the USA and Europe and so forth, TV stations, all promoting the same thing. And
Mockingbird.
So that's what the majority of humanity is getting. They're not getting a lot of the alternative stuff that's coming through Telegram, Rumble, Patreon, all those other alternative channels.
It's true, and it's quite incredible. You'd be really, really pleased to hear that there's a grassroots movement going on, and it is decentralized, and it's coming through the soul, and it is expressed like this: Channel 7's helicopter flying over a protest versus one of our local heroes, Rukshan's live Facebook feed. Channel 7, 1,200 views, live views. Rukshan, 59,000.
Yes, this is similar to Joe Rogan in the States. Joe Rogan's got about 5 million followers or viewers, and the CNN's like not even 1 million. This is what's happening at the moment, and that's why we can take heart from that, because CNN is just shocking. I don't get me started on them. I mean, it's so blatant what they're doing, and a lot of the presenters are so hypnotized and appear to be controlled. They're robotic in their adherence to the mainstream narrative that WHO are feeding them. But before you mentioned the cabal, we can imagine a pyramid, and while the invisible top of the pyramid, the proverbial eye in the pyramid, but a malignant eye, not, they are the opposite of the white pyramid. These are the dark pyramid, and this is the dark pyramid, I should say. And so this cabal and these cartels, these interlocking directorates that have been set up for thousands of years, particularly got stronger in the last few centuries. they are dictating to the WEF, the WHO, the Bill Gateses, and even the now, sad to say, very corrupted United Nations, which is the hope of the world. So, and all the 193 countries, member countries, have signed up to the WEF directive, and so they're doing the lockstep program, which was written about 10 years ago, falling into lockstep, being directed by the WEF as good little soldiers.
Well,
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
it is.
And no one questions it.
Well, I think that because the glamour is around, it's very thick and it's affecting people, and they're trying to find comfort. In a way, it's a very strange action, because the very thing that they're trying to do to take over the freedom is actually releasing people into their own sovereignty freedom. It's quite a backhanded thing. Now, I have heard you talk about Shambhala, and I'm wondering if this is actually a wave from Shambhala that is helping to wake people up.
Yeah, most definitely. You know, the Shambhala Impacts was the first book that I wrote in 2000. It was released, in fact, on the so-called fifth Shambhala Impact, which are releases of really potent energy from this planetary center we call Shambhala, or also known in lay terms as Shangri-La, the mythical Shangri-La. And essentially, it is the crown chakra of the planet, where resides the being we call Sanakumara, or the Lord of the World, who is the personality expression of what we call the planetary logos. Now, I realize I'm getting a bit abstract and esoteric here, but just to give you some background, that center called Shambhala represents the crown chakra, or the head chakra, and the masters of wisdom, and who are part of the greater ashram of the Christ, or Lord Maitreya, represent the heart center of the planet, and humanity represents the throat center, which is the mind. So, and it's ruled by Saturn, the Lord of Karma, and therefore we have karmic free will to determine our destiny. The masters can only stimulate us and encourage us. They can't interfere technically, karmically, in decisions we make. And so what's happening in 2025, this once in a century conclave, is between the Lord of the World, Sanakumara, and the so-called council chamber of Shambhala that some of the masters of wisdom are members of, where they will decide what is the best way to handle the next oncoming century, leaving humanity to their free will as much as possible, of course, to determine their destiny. And so this is a really big deal. This is what I was saying before. The materialistic forces know that this is going to happen. And by the way, they are our brothers. You know, they're our brothers on the so-called left-hand path. They will eventually, you know, that they are the balance in the solar system that we work off towards the light.
Which is
very.
It's the backhanded, crazy upside downness of the spiral paradox.
Yeah. You know, none of us are free from being black magicians, if you like, until we take the fourth initiation, which is quite an esoteric comment, which maybe might go over the heads of some of you in the audience. But
people would love to know about it.
It just gives you an idea of the degree of submersion in matter that we are all trying to extricate ourselves from, and particularly the at the moment, that sticky swamp quagmire of the astral plane. In the labor, when Hercules goes into the eighth labor, as the eighth sign Scorpio, and he confronts the hissing dragon, or Hydra, as it's called, in the swamp of Linnea in the ancient mythological story. And these 9 heads, this is the Scorpio labor. The 9 heads relate to 3 times 3 attributes that humans have, The first three, sex, comfort, and money, to the physical plane. The second three to the astral plane, hatred, desire for power and fear. And the third three that relate to the mental plane, pride, separativeness, and cruelty. And so we carry one or other of these things, all of us to some degree, but in Scorpio and for Scorpios, we're really intensely tested on those particular things. So
are you Scorpio as well?
I have Mercury in Scorpio.
Oh, so do I.
And that's a prime writing tools, you could say. And I've just had the sun go over my Mercury in Scorpio yesterday on its annual course through the heavens. So, and it's still in orb of aspect of that, actually. So you're getting a little bit of Mercury in Scorpio today. Scorpio is a sign of penetration, both at the physical, sexual level, for instance, and at the mental level, where we pierce the veil of illusion and we reach behind that which is hidden. And, the Buddha talks a lot about this in his teachings.
Yes.
The veil of Maya.
Yes.
So Scorpio is one of the great signs of healing in terms of self-healing and healers. You are a Scorpio healer yourself. Scorpio acts as the exorcist that lances the boil, that releases the toxins, that brings to the surface that which is hidden, is the shaman that mediates between the two worlds. This is the great healing power of Scorpio. A lot of Scorpio rising people, clients I've had, are actually psychologists and work at the mental emotional level. But you'll find doctors who are great sort of unconscious healers who have got Scorpio strong in their horoscope.
I've got a stellium Vulcan, Sun, Mercury, Neptune, Scorpio, 12, 13.
Yes, I had a chart when you gave me your data, so I'm slightly familiar with it. But
because there is this laser focus that I really relate to. What's behind the veil is so scary for people. It's so scary that it stops people from taking that step forward. It is just like the Wizard of Oz. It's this tiny little thing behind the curtain. It's nothing. And as soon as you get around that curtain, it's so easy to get rid of. And I just highly recommend people not being scared of themselves and going in there and have a bit of a sweep out. It's
really, this is the unknown, and fear is the greatest of all glamours that humanity suffers from. And that is the main thing that's being worked upon the last 22 months, is fear of death, which has been an old, is very, very ancient. And that's been worked on to the max.
Yes.
Fear of death, fear of dying from some horrible disease and so forth. That is the main thing or glamour that the materialistic forces have worked upon insidiously the last couple of years. And this fear of death is predicted to, in the next couple of centuries, the Master Dwars School says that this ancient fear will be eradicated through the knowledge and acknowledgement of the fact of reincarnation, the fact that we're evolving consciousness over many, many lifetimes, and we'll take various initiations and reach a point of liberation where we actually don't have to come back anymore. And we go on to other evolutions within the solar system or beyond the solar system. This is quite logical when you examine the secret teachings, the mystery teachings as they're called. So we are also on the cusp of that realization in the next century or two, which is extraordinary. And it already has started. There are so many good books now on reincarnation of kids that they find who start talking about their last lifetime, have no knowledge of where they've been, and then their parents take them to this place, and lo and behold, everything is there that the kid's been talking about. We have surgeons and medical people who have had near-death experiences or have worked in the operating theatre where people have left the body and come back and told their stories. There are so many good books and literature around now about that, from really reliable, qualified people. And this is the science of the age of Aquarius, that where the mainstream science and esoteric science will blend into one. There will be this, and I always try and do that in my writings, to especially the hidden history of humanity work, for instance, with the science of geology, paleontology, and so forth, and to show the evidence, to link it to some of the esoteric statements by Blavatsky, for instance.
Incredible. I had a near-death experience when I was a child, and the one thing that it gives me is a quality that is so hard to explain, but put me on a quest. And that quest is to just unpack it a little bit. It has everything in there, everywhere where we're going, everywhere where we were from. But
yes.
to write it, impossible. It's as big as the cosmos. It's as big as the cosmos. And I am in fact really excited for the Aquarian age, because I feel in my being, my soul, I'm closer to an Aquarian age person than the Piscean. I'm quite happy to be over there.
That's true, Amanda. There are three groups. There's the ones who are still caught up in the Piscean paradigm, and that's probably the majority of humanity. There are those who are already got one foot in Aquarius on this 500-year cusp of the cycle. And there's the group in between who are torn between those two groups, which is a portion of humanity as well. The Aquarian age doesn't astronomically technically start till about 2117, but the 500-year cusp started about, well, just before Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius, was discovered in 1781. So we've got a ways to go yet through this cuspal period, but this is one of the key reasons why the world is in so much turmoil and conflict. And the other reason is that the hierarchy, the masters of wisdom who have decided to externalize and return, are already on their way. And so their highly refined frequencies are impacting upon the planet, and paradoxically causing conflict as well, or adding to the conflict, because the status quo of this lower vibrating frequency of humanity is in conflict with the much higher frequencies of the hierarchy. And so this is another thing that is contributing.
Very true. And this actually might explain what I was sort of talking about, the tribe, massive tribe wandering off in the narrative, because it's very normal. It's a normalized comfort for them to just listen to Auntie, listen to the radio, listen to the propaganda, and just go that way because of the Piscean element. That actually, I would actually, my intuition actually says that's where the tribal thing is different. Perhaps people who are more like the seeds or close to the seeds for the Aquarian age are actually holding a different energy, a different frequency. That explains it to me.
Yeah, I think the ABC has been a promoter of conservatism in science for the last 2 decades through various people and shows that they've deleted and they've promoted something else. And this is just a reflection of what else is going on in the world. But at the moment, I feel that the majority of the scientists are actually against the mainstream narrative. It's just that they don't get a voice. Yeah. There's incredibly qualified people from Oxford University and other places in the world who are just getting completely silenced in the various what's the word, censorship.
Yeah, mainstream media is just totally got its own narrative, and it won't allow.
There's a minority, I think, of scientists and medical people associated with WHO and WEF, but I think a lot of them are paid off. They have interest in big pharma. They're all compromised. This has been proven actually in many reports. That SAGE group, SAGE, that advises the British government, are all completely compromised. All of them are in the pocket of big pharma.
Really fortunate. I was really fortunate to interview one of our local minds. Her name's Dr. Judy Williman. She had Dr. Judy Williman. She's in fact qualified to be a chief health officer or on the advisory board for all of the programs. I'll just use that word. Totally shut down. But she understands the whole program, and it was just refreshing to give her a platform to speak, which was lovely, which was just incredible. I just wanted to shift over to Saturn, because we're getting on in time. Sorry?
The last hour has flown by.
It has been really easy, actually, once I settled down a little bit. I think it's just out of the lower energies. Yeah. So, the Saturn, okay, I keep hearing people talk about the Saturnian Luciferian cult.
Right.
Now, to me, that is a glamour to stop people understanding the Saturn ring pass not.
Yeah.
Am I calling that one right?
Oh, yeah, I think you're right. What you say, it's been distorted again.
Okay.
Saturn, Satan, and tying in with the Lucifer narrative, all that kind of stuff. Saturn is the lord of karma, and at the moment, Saturn is going through this square orbit to Uranus, and in many ways, Saturn represents the status quo at the moment, and Uranus represents the new thinking that's coming. And this is this great clash that's being reflected all around the world at the moment. So I haven't heard of that particular cult that you're talking about. I've heard similar things, but essentially it's just taking esoteric knowledge and distorting it and creating fear with it. It's simple as that. Yes. And playing on people's cultural and religious conditioning, particularly through Christianity, the Western Christian world. So that's how I see that.
And for my journey on the esoteric path that I haven't stuck to forever, it has been the most empowering, incredible journey myself. And it's you are the one who gauges your path, and this is ultimately how it works. We are the ones in charge of our shadow. We are the one in charge of our glamour. We're the ones in charge of the glamour that comes with the ego as well. All of these things, no one else can do it for us. So can you just perhaps talk to us about the Saturn ring pass knot? I know ring pass knots as initiations.
The rings of Saturn are symbolic of staying contained within a certain particular part of the solar system. At one, up until a few centuries ago, we didn't know, most of the world didn't know anyway, that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto beyond Saturn existed. So when Uranus was discovered in 1781, then that opened the world up to beyond the rings of Saturn, a greater, a broader solar system, a different kind of consciousness. The energy of Uranus being that which is innovative, creative, original, the inventor, the planet of science, esoterically considered, both exoteric and esoteric science, the hierophant of initiation. So, but Saturn's a very important planet. It's a so-called mental planet. It rules the throat chakra, which is the seat of the mental body. It's one of the 4 laws of karma. We don't know what the other 3 planets are. I have speculated on what they are in the past. Saturn makes us face up to the consequences of our actions. That's why it's exalted in Libra. And I discussed this fact that Libra, sign we've just been through, is opposite the first sign Aries, the first sign of the zodiac being Aries, where action is initiated, whether that be thoughts or ideas that are impulsed, and we see the consequences or results of those actions in the opposite sign Libra, and hence karma, action, reaction. And that's why Saturn is exalted in Libra, and for other reasons too, because Saturn is that thought form creating capacity of bringing ideas together, the raw ideas, and creating a geometrical pattern or thought form with them that can eventually manifest in the physical plane, and we call that magic. That's why Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn, a sign well known for manifestation and or the science of magical manifestation, both black and white.
Quite different to the material force or the Black Lodge. Quite different, because it's the materializing is a step through the chakra system as well, to create that birth of that idea through the Saturnian movement, motion. And that's where we're heading. I'm so excited. I can't wait for the Aquarian age. I really am. I'm just so excited. I just have been quite disappointed that we're not in it right now. It'll be quite incredible. So again, it's the to me, it's the fear again, and the program and the glamour that's put over so that people stop in their tracks and don't actually embark on the journey with the.
This is a key thing with Australia and New Zealand. I've noticed. I've been really disappointed with what I would really call cowardice in that country. And I, in my last newsletter, or the one before, I talked about the fact that both my grandfathers, fought in World War II and died in World War II, and fought for liberty, the liberties that we take for granted. In the last 2 years, we've had those liberties taken away from us universally, and that our grandfathers would be turning in their graves to see the lack of people standing up to protest against these liberties that have been taken away. It's been particularly noticeable in Australia, and of course the reason is because of the super draconian lockdowns that have come about, and that is Saturn in its lower aspect, by the way.
Taurus.
All the planets and signs have a lower and higher expression, and Australia is a Capricorn personality. It's a Virgo soul, but it's a Capricorn personality. And what we've seen in Australia is lower aspect of Saturn, draconian, draconic. These are all lower Saturn keywords. And that's why we've seen such a shocking example of lockdown in Australia as opposed to many other countries in the world. I mean, a cruel lockdown. People like Berejiklian and Dan Andrews have been some of the most potent expressions of that cruelty, that meanness, lack of empathy, lack of compassion. It's been extraordinary to witness. But of course, their time will come. Their karma will come back to them at some point. They are only ignorant and erring. They're not necessarily evil, as some people brand them. But it's hard not to make that judgment, isn't it? So, and Saturn is the planet of judgment, and it's amazing that Australia has been known as a hard-working, hard-partying kind of nation for years, much loved by the Americans, and of course a very diversified society with over 250, I think, ethnic components to it. But what we've seen in the last 2 years is this horrible change that has taken place, and Australia now is really under the thumb. They've got to emerge and stand up for themselves and link in like-minded groups to break out of this, what they call prison Australia, the penal colony, the new penal colony, the big tech penal colony, in a sense, that it's become. They're building these detention camps outside Brisbane and in other states here, and this is very, very troublesome. Some of these things that are going on, and of course, it's all working towards the social credit system that the Chinese have already had in place for the last 10 years. Whether it works or not is another thing. These are the best laid plans of the materialistic forces, but it could all come to naught in the next couple of years if people stand up for themselves.
I believe
really make do the best they can.
The digital is very interesting. And okay, well, what we know about our fellow Australians and New Zealanders is the heart that they have, and that's exactly the weapon that it was used upon the heart in the propaganda, which was, propaganda beignets saying things, the factual way that they implement propaganda is that you don't appeal to the logic, you appeal to the emotions. They did that from the start. They did the ochre, protecting brothers and sisters, etc., and really kept hammering it. I do
yes,
not.
and the other thing of Capricorn is the Capricorns like to follow orders, and so a lot of Australians have just rolled over and gone along with the dictates, and now a lot of them are realizing that they shouldn't have done that, and they have to figure out some other way to deal with the situation. The regimentation is one of the lower aspects of the seventh ray energy, which is coming in at the moment. Organize the way of organization, but regimentation, to be easily regimented is one of the shadow aspects of the seventh ray, and that's what's happened in Australia, which I've always said has got strong seventh ray somewhere in its makeup.
Oh, does it? That's absolutely very interesting, because there is something going on here that is quite different, I feel, as though anywhere else, because we haven't had war here. We haven't. This is just like, what is this? People don't actually know. Is it the Pocahontas story where they couldn't actually recognize the sails of the ship when it was first coming in? Couldn't recognize it. I feel as though that's what's going on here. People can't recognize what totalitarianism is. They do not know it. They don't know it.
A lot of people cannot, and I've said this many times in my newsletters, a lot of people cannot conceive of the fact that there is an evil group of people on this planet that does not have humanity's best interest at heart whatsoever. That is only the kind of thing in science fiction and movies. But this is in fact what has happened. And so humanity has been blindsided in this respect, and are only just starting to play catch up now. Go, whoa, what has actually happened the last couple of years?
There's a lot of very quiet action going on because of all of the violence towards the people, all the rubber bullets. I'm fifth generation Australian, generations of military, and I just went, the narrative they put out was the biggest insult upon all Australians, but it was almost like everybody retreated and are reforming, because that was war. That was the declaration of war upon us. That was the clearest symbol. Now it's just working on, everybody has to work on their inner power. It's just so important at the moment to keep your inner power and connection to Creator. Have to do that for us to move forward. They're gathering, a lot of people gathering together. There are a lot of movements going on. I think you're going to be in for a surprise.
I think the combined total of all those movements is part of the groundswell that's pushback that's occurring globally at the moment.
Yeah.
I just seen some footage this morning on Telegram of huge demonstrations in France. I mean, the streets absolutely clogged with tens of thousands of people. I don't know what city it was in, but it's going on all the time. It's not being reported. I mean, I post some of these things to Facebook, but on my Facebook page, but I know that they're going to be algorithmically minimized, and the last two that I did yesterday have got like 5 likes or something like that, because no one's seeing them. But this is going on, and they can only shut this down for so long. They can't keep the lid. It's like they're trying to keep the lid on now, and the steam popping out left, right, and center. It's going to explode.
They're running out of money. And sorry, I cut you off.
That's all right. I was just going to say, the shit could really hit the fan in Scorpio. That's what Scorpio is about. It's about revealing the shit within yourself or within the society, and bringing it to the surface and purifying it. Well, I said the other day at another meeting I was in that I think that some really big thing could happen during the Scorpio time, world event-wise, in terms of people really taking back their power. Scorpio is a sign of power, ruled by Pluto, and people are reclaiming their power every day. It's so encouraging to see. And also Scorpio is piercing that veil that I was talking about before, to see the obvious lie behind the veil. A good example of this is Kamala Harris. I saw this shocking video about her the other day, where she had some child actors in an interview talking about space exploration, and it was so hammed up and so artificial, so inauthentic. I couldn't believe it that this possible future president of the USA was, who I already knew a lot about anyway, was doing this. But this is just the artifice. What I'm getting at is here that all these artifices, people are starting to see through. People are starting to see through the ABC for what it actually is now, what it's become. So this is all very encouraging.
It really is, and it's a very exciting time. And I really feel it too. There's I'm not going to announce it, but I mean, there's going to be groundswell. It is cutting through. It's cutting through to everybody's heart, the truth now, and I really feel quite excited about what's going up. I'm really hopeful that things are completely different by January. Because when we get to 2025, I want things to be humming along beautifully. I really don't want them to be disappointed.
Yes. Well, I think it's just up to each individual to do as much as they can in their own community, wherever they find themselves, and to be resolute and persistent and consistent about that. That's the only way that we'll get to that idyllic point in 2025. But as I said before, I think things may get much worse before then, and for all of us to not be daunted and be apprehensive about that, and really find your courage to stand up for yourself and to survive what may be coming. You know, what all the other kind of arrows they have in their armament are going to shoot at humanity. There are definitely other things that they've already been hinting at, such as the Marburg virus, which was announced by Bill Gates Foundation and also by WHO. They always do these things to prepare, you know, to get it into the public consciousness, so they're not taken too much by surprise. Surely, if that goes ahead, if that gets released, or a new, you know, the epsilon variant or whatever, people are going to see through that. Surely they are. And even when Dan Andrews was talking the other day, he was enumerating all the lower Saturnian restrictions and say, you're not going to have this, you're not going to have that, you're not going to fool us, you're not going to put it off. And then he goes on to say, then after the double jab, there'll be a third jab, and he goes on and on and on. I think this is just so transparent. This guy's a maniac. He's totally obsessed with the role that he's playing and controlled by whatever minders he has. So people must surely come to their senses and start to really weigh balance the pairs of opposites on the mental plane and start to make some decisions. And this is the realm of Libra.
Okay, and there you go, the weighing up, the polarity, and it's like one gift comes with another one, and in my readings, in my tarot readings, there's been so much of the adjustment card in the 12th deck, which is Libra, justice, etc. But it's balancing up. It's this important time. It's very important. I've heard that if we were to say Dan Andrews' scale of wealth and money and opportunity that he had last year, it's empty. The people's wealth is now, the people's wealth is much higher. They're running out of money. I made
a similar analogy in my newsletter, my last Libra newsletter. I made a similar analogy to that, Amanda, where I talked about the forces that you know, of coercion that are controlling the world at the moment have this one scale of the Libran scales weighed right down like that. But what's happening now, almost imperceptibly, is that the other scale is starting to push, and therefore this lower scale is coming up. And that's what we're seeing. I think by Libra next year, we're going to see a different story altogether.
So with those scales, it's one of those exciting things that I'm seeing. I've heard that they've run out of money, so they can't employ the pay for the rubber bullets, right? We had a protest, or actually a picnic, because of course we've got basically a passport here. We've got a passport here. You can't go in anywhere unless you, in certain places, unless you've got a passport. It hasn't quite, it's called the tick. So what people did was, there was all the restaurants in Melbourne and in St Kilda, you know where I'm talking about, and the other side of the street, the tram line, were all the people having a picnic. It was the most...
Oh, I saw that in other countries in Europe.
Yes, and I was excited to see
outside the restaurant. Yeah, it was great.
It wasn't as vast as France, but this was a different situation, because anytime the nurses have been out to a park to sit down to protest, what's happened is that they get arrested, hassled, etc., etc. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of police. This was the first time that the police were cooperative. So we've got two sides of things happening and continue. It's this little bit of a to and fro and a tug and a push and a pull. And
this is innovation coming in. It's wonderful. And by the way, speaking about the nurses, I don't know if you saw that report, but I'd encourage all your listeners to join Telegram and to join the channel called World Doctors Alliance. That's where you'll get a heap of information about what's going on. And on that stream, I saw a PDF document of testimonies of medical workers in Australia, nurses, people working in ICUs and so forth. Extraordinary stuff. These are all whistleblowers. I think it's called Nurse Whistleblowers or something. But it's an amazing document. It's got many pages of personal accounts of what's going on, vaccine side effects, all sorts of scams that are happening. This is wonderful. This is another encouraging factor that's happening for Australia, that all these things are coming to the surface, and people are shouting the truth from the rooftops.
And it's being done very quietly as well. It's a whisper, you know, and I feel it's very exciting, because the authorities can't really do anything. One of the biggest threats that they do is that they arrest you for incitement, and then they put, so because it's a finable, you only have to pay a fine, but what they do is they put bail conditions, which are gag orders. And so they do. So everyone's being really retreated and just working behind the scenes.
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage to stand up for the cops. I saw one video where a guy, I think he might have been from Britain, but he was standing up to some Australian cops who were trying to arrest him, or trying to tell him to direct him on something or other. I can't remember what it was, but essentially he was standing his grounds in the face of intimidation of armed police, of course, but also the conversation. He was holding the conversation, and he was being very specific in his wording. Not many people have the understanding or the intelligence or the courage to do something like that. The more people do that, because it really discourages police who have to question themselves, why am I doing this? And many of the police have, and they're coming out, and there are a few police in Australia that I've seen giving videos about...
Alex Cooney. Alex Cooney is New South Wales.
That's the guy, yeah. That's one of them.
Yeah, and it's also coming out about the compromised people at their top, like the commissioners. They're all compromised, they're all blackmailed. So I mean, we're at this point, the truth people are actually at the point where we're understanding that, well, I've kind of known it for a long time, that they're compromised. They've got blackmail all over them. And they've signed contracts for all sorts of things. And it's becoming so obvious. Phillip.
One of the things I'm thinking for Australia is that the workers are going to have a big hand in this change, and rightly so. Truckies, the builders, labourers, the workers on the building sites who are forced to take the jab in Melbourne, or lost their jobs as a result of all that. I saw a great video with John Wilson, one of the
trade
former
union
trade unions leaders, interviewed by that guy Ricardo Bossi.
Yes,
His name. whatever your politics, left or right, you can label this Ricardo guy left or right or whatever, but he was talking to a dyed-in-the-wool, dinky-die Aussie trade union guy who gave this passionate rave for about 45 minutes. It was hilarious because he's got some quaint sayings and repetitions that he uses, but the truth that's coming out of his mouth is amazing. I'd encourage anyone to watch that video.
It's brilliant.
So you can really identify, all Australians can identify with that language that he uses. And
it's the action.
Right from the heart,
Yes, and it's the action I'm looking for that we're not going to talk about too much, except for, what is it, turning the tap, electricity, turning everything off. That's what's going to happen.
We saw what happened when the truckies blocked the borders, just stopped everything, and so John Wilson was talking about, well, we just go and turn off the power substations, we'll go and turn off the sewage, we'll go and turn off the water, in their fight back against the governments. So
yes,
things could get quite ugly in that respect. Of course, they were both saying, we can do this non-violently, but we've seen violent reactions to what's going on. The more people get oppressed, the more they're going to want to explode, and the greater resentment that they're holding on to as well, and anger and
yes,
hatred. These are things that the spiritual community has to try and offset in various ways, subjectively too.
It's true. It's really, really true. And I mean, justice is one thing that has to occur. And I would put down, in my reality, the so-called quarantine camps are in fact not for people like us. In fact, for where we're going to hold them for their trials, because the trials are coming very soon. It's not going to go much longer. As you were saying, the oppression has become compression, and it's not going to go much longer. With the booster shots that you brought up before, Phillip, that's, I feel as though when people are going to start realizing that they're part of a program rather than a health scheme.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to be vaccinated, and they're not going to have their pass anymore. And everybody's reporting as well that there just isn't the visitors, the shoppers. There aren't the population isn't going out and populating the restaurants and all. They're empty.
Oh, okay.
So there's something going on. So there's disconnect that's going on. The disconnect from what the narrative is to what the reality is starting to twinkle on one of the scales. We'll see. Yeah. Well, we might wind up. Would you like to thank you so much for everything that you've imparted today? Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm sure every Australian is going to appreciate your words. Would you like to, have you got something that you'd like to finish off with?
Well, I'll just reiterate, as I did in my Leo newsletter for this year, just a few months ago, that we all have to stand up and really tap into our courage. And courage is a quality of the heart. It comes from the French word le coeur, which means heart, and it's therefore associated with love. Love and courage are two sides of the same coin, and that is the key factor that the whole world needs to invoke, but particularly Australians at the moment in their shocking situation that they find themselves. So I'm sending lots of love and light to Australia always, and we'll be keeping an eye on what's unfolding. So I wish everyone the best there, and to keep fighting on, keep up the good fight.
Yes. Thank you so much, Phillip. I'm going to put all of your links for your web pages where you can subscribe to Phillip's newsletter. You can also get an astrological reading from him, which will be quite different to anything you've ever experienced. And also a link for the humanity history, hidden history of humanity. Got it? It's absolutely.
And I'm on Facebook as well. I used to work in the belly of the beast, even though I'm censored. So you can catch sort of various articles and post them. I do there too. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Then that's great.